Hey guys, this is Jenn and Julien, and you're listening to X Appeal episode 33.
Yay. So, all right, last episode we brought on Amber, who
The
is
OG
lesbian YouTube personality. She's
activist.
an activist and an advocate for the LGBTQIA plus
Mhm.
community. Thank you very much. I think I got it
Yeah.
all in there. So now I think it's time to explore the gay community.
Yeah.
And I mean, what better way to do that than to bring on my gay best friend?
I mean, that's a great idea. That was a great pitch from you, and
right. No, but the reason I thought of him is because he is, I guess, super reflective of his relationship this 8-year relationship that he's had with his boyfriend Jacob. And we talk about, I mean, he came out when we were in college.
Mm-hmm. So late.
And I still to this day remember the moment he did it, and I was just so relieved for him. I had already known, of course, but I was so relieved that he felt comfortable enough to finally be who he genuinely always has been.
Yeah.
And I've just been super proud of him. And I'm super proud of the relationship that he's built and the life that he's built with his boyfriend. They just got a house together. I think they're going to get married pretty soon.
But you were saying, if my understanding, they're somewhat open as well.
Yeah, that's one thing about the relationship. So I know, I mean, they're visiting here in LA, and if COVID didn't exist, this would be the chance for them to like go out at night in West Hollywood.
Everything's open. They can go out at night.
Yeah, but listen, they're being responsible. They're trying to be responsible and not get sick. So, but if this were any other circumstance, they would like bring home a third or a fourth person to go and have fun with for the night. So, and I always was curious about this because, you know, like when Matt visited me last time, which was maybe a few weeks ago, it was just him. And I said, "What's Jake up to this weekend?" And he said, "Oh yeah, he's hanging out with this guy." And I just thought, how? Like, how are you not on a plane home as we speak?
Yeah.
You know, how can you keep that contained? Like, how can you keep that jealousy at bay? So I'm really curious for them to kind of break down how they've come to that understanding and being okay with all that.
I know. Look, I hate this. I mean, I love and I hate this topic because, man, like as I see all these couples failing and the history of my family and stuff, it genuinely makes me question this whole like one love for the rest of your life type of thing. But then when I think about the idea of my partner going on the weekend with somebody else, I don't want it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like, so what the fuck are we supposed to do?
I mean, also you're getting old, Julien. So it's like, you know, it's not like you've been it's not like you've been your current girlfriend since you were like 15 years old and you're growing up together, and all of a sudden your lives are like so dramatically different from how they were, you know, 10 years ago. Like, like you're older now. So I feel like you're in a position where you know what you want, you know what works for you and what doesn't.
No, for sure. No, absolutely. But I just feel like we live in a confusing time.
Yeah.
I feel like we live in a time right now where the past way of doing relationships are getting broken down right now. And everybody's trying to figure out, we're like in this experimental phase of relationship. And this is where we're at. And none of us, like, you still have a ton of people doing I keep saying traditional, but like the traditional way of doing a couple. And then you have this whole side of people that are also doing their own thing, right? And then they're figuring out if it works for them, but what works for them doesn't work for these people.
Yep.
So I almost feel like it was easier back then when you had one way to do it, and that's just how you do it, you know?
That's why I think it's best to talk to like everyday people who have managed to figure it out.
Oh my God, yeah, it's so informative. It's so informative.
Being together for 8 years, like, that's longer than a lot of marriages that I've seen.
Yeah.
Longer than my marriage.
I know, but like, do you? What's your take on this? Like, because I know you and I both don't. I mean, I know I have a hard time thinking of an open relationship. You know, at least not now. I don't know. I can't say how I would feel 15 years down the line with the same partner. And maybe 15 years out, I'll feel different. I have no idea. But like, what's your take on relationships right now? Because you're in right now. You have a kid with Jared, and I'm assuming you will eventually somewhat think about marriage. So you're going for that traditional relationship style. Your previous one didn't work. So what is making you doing it again, apart from having another a different partner? And do you ever question it? Do you ever question like, there's some mistakes that have been made, how can I change this?
Of course I question, you know, the concept of marriage. How could you not, when you've seen so many marriages fail? I mean, you know, bringing my parents' friends or my friends' parents into the equation, and seeing long-term marriages like that, and knowing what has gone on behind the scenes. Of course you question, you know, are we meant to be with one person our whole lives? And maybe not. All I know is right now I'm, let's face it, almost 40 years old. I'll be 38 in February.
Now that's old.
I know. All right. So, and I shut the fuck up. So I just think that right now I'm happy as is.
Yeah.
I would be happy being married. I think for me, it's about the person and less about the concept of marriage. This is just me. I know that Jared's so different from everybody that I've been with prior to him, every committed relationship that I've been in, to the point where, yes, 1,000%, I'm open to getting married again. If I even saw light shades of somebody of the person that I got married to when I was 24 years old, there's no way I would consider it. It's all about the person for me.
And I think you said something, you said, right now I'm happy. So I think that it seems like one of the key elements is to focus on the now and not pressure yourself about what's going to be like, oh my God, how are we going to do it in 3 years? You know, it's like, does it feel right now? Do it. And then we figure it out as we move. You know? But that also, but having that, I mean, for you, it's different because you have a kid. But I feel like you can't really have that speech with your partner, because if saying, well, it works for right now, it seems like it seems like there's no commitment. Right. No, so and people want commitment.
At the beginning, when I knew that I was pregnant, before we moved in together, I told him straight up, I said, this does not mean that we're going to, like, in other words, I don't want you to look at the baby as, okay, now we have to get married.
Yeah.
What I'm saying?
We have to be together. Like, that's it. We're locked in.
Yeah. I don't want you to be here and feel like you have to be here for any reason, for any obligation. I want you to be here because you want to be here, and vice versa. Nothing in this world is guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed. If you have a kid, if you've been together for many, many years, there's still no guarantee that you're going to wind up together or be together for the long term. You know, so I think that the less restrictions and less labels we put on things, the better. It makes people feel better inside the relationship, makes them feel more secure, I think.
And freer, too, I think. I think there's the sense of losing your freedom.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, I can spend the rest of my life with Jared and be perfectly happy. And that's a good feeling, you know.
How do you justify that speech of saying, well, you know, I don't want you to feel like just because we have a baby together, we're going to stay together, and then think about marrying him? Because technically that's the promise you make each other. So all that speech is now gone. Once you get married, it's like, okay, well, now you have to stay. That goes against it. Huh?
No, you don't have to stay.
Why get married then?
You know, I think that's something that you and I have kind of circled back on many podcasts, you know, prior to this, about what that means, what the concept of marriage really means. Because I mean, in theory, like, that means it's forever, and you work it out and you fight to work it out no matter what.
I understand the marriage. I understand the concept of marriage, saying, hey, this is for real. And there's no backing out, right? But I don't understand the concept of marriage while still saying, "Oh, well, you know, you can be here if you want to."
Well, to me, it makes so the idea of you're getting married, so you have to be together forever. That to me is an extremely toxic way of thinking, because think about all the things that can go wrong in a relationship, and the idea of you staying together and working through things that are unworkable, no matter what. Like I was not about to allow myself to get cheated on over and over and over again and waste my entire life trying to have an exclusive relationship with somebody who I knew it was never going to work out with. So why waste your life? You only do this once. So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from is, yeah, marriage is nice. It's nice to share the same last name. I want someday for all of us, me, Ethan, and Jared, to have the same last name. Yeah, of course. But for me, I guess it's just more about the person than the label. But
yeah, I'm still struggling with that concept of.
But you don't have to box yourself into any kind of label with anybody. You are.
I know. I'm just trying to understand it. I'm just trying to wrap. Yeah. I don't mean that that's for me. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying about, you told Jared that he didn't have to stay if he didn't want to, but then you guys are thinking about marriage, which to me is the direct opposite of that state of mind. As much as, we can get married, and if it doesn't work out, we can get divorced. But so then, if to me, marriage has always been seen as this promise that we're staying together no matter what. But if you get married with that feeling of saying, well, if you don't want to be here, you can leave, then why get married? That's where I'm struggling with,
I mean, to me right now, because we do have a kid together, it's like, yeah, you're gonna go through bumps in the road. But for Ethan, if it's a big bump, then you really have to work to figure out that big bump and how to get over it.
I feel like I would still try to figure it out for the kid's sake, whether I'm married or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, to me, it always comes back
whether
to
you're married or not. Yes, you try to figure it out. We're going to try to figure out whatever it might be.
So, unless you're telling me like, hey, you could stay in this relationship or you can leave if you never feel unhappy, but like we have a kid, we have to work together, and you say the only reason we're getting married is like tax purposes and all that business side of it. Sure, I understand it, but that's not very romantic. Like,
no, it's not.
Kind of like, hey, let's get married and file a taxes together. I'm just like, what the fuck is this? A business transaction? I don't know. But anyways, let's see how they do it.
Yeah.
And how that works out.
So in a move that I know I'm going to regret, let's welcome in Matt and Jake. Hey.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Julien. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. So how's
you know Jenn from high school?
Oh.
I've known Jenn since we were
Middle
12
school.
years old.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
We both know where the bodies are buried with each other.
Yeah. I wonder, was she kind of nerdy or was she cool?
Oh, God, that's a loaded question.
Did you start drinking, by the way?
I have had 2 mimosas this morning.
2 man-mosas? Yeah.
Yeah. Jenn was nerdy, but she didn't realize how attractive she was back then.
No, scratch that. I was not attractive.
Okay,
I had
you had one of those swan moments, duckling into swan. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
an ugly duckling.
The ugly duckling into a swan, from your Elvis era to.
Oh, Elvis era. That's interesting.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Oh no. So the Elvis era was decided to give me an asexual haircut when I was probably in grade school, and that really didn't stop until I was well into middle school. And everybody called me Elvis whenever I was growing up because they gave me an Elvis-esque haircut because they said it was easier. My hair was super thick. They didn't want to have to put up with it, so they just chopped it off.
See, I don't know if it's I think it's kind of a diss to call a girl Elvis. It seems like it's more of a diss. It's like a kind of like an insult without being really an insult. It's like a gentle insult to you.
Basically.
Yeah, because Elvis was a very talented musician.
Yeah.
It's not flattering to call.
It's not flattering to be 6 years old and called
Elvis as a little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I leaned into it. I started doing Elvis impersonation.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you care to do one right now?
Thank you.
No? Okay.
Those days are behind me. Yeah. So to tell you a little bit about, well, actually, why am I telling you about yourselves? Why don't you tell Julien about yourselves?
Oh God. So we're introduced to this podcast because of Jenn and because I've known her since we were 12 years old, and we have been together
8 years.
8 years.
8 years on New
8
Year's Eve.
years. Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, but from my understanding is
So-
you guys have a solid relationship, but you're also somewhat open, right? So that's, I think, what the angle
Correct.
is about our
Correct.
podcast that fits the whole
Yeah.
narrative.
Yes.
So
And
how does that work?
You know, I think in any kind of relationship, what you need is trust and you need honesty. I think in an open relationship, you need that even more, because we will have relations with other people, and the rule for us specifically is that the other person either has to always know about it, A, and B, they have to be invited.
Yes.
The other person can decline said invitation. However, the ask always has to be there. So
Okay.
for us, I mean, it works. I mean,
Yeah. There's a lot of, and I will add to that the word communication. I think it's just really important that we're both open about our needs. And if one of us, I don't want to say isn't fulfilling them, but if something else is a little bit better at that, we're going to go for it. And I think we've done a really great job of being open with one another in that regard.
So when you mean you are always inviting the other, that means you always end up, like a lot of times you end up in a 3-person situation or 4.
Or more.
3,
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
4, 5.
Yeah.
6.
Well,
It depends on the day.
that's really just more work than it's worth.
It
to be
is
honest.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
You got to
That's-
please everybody, and
Yeah.
They participating at the same time when there's like a what is it, like a sixthom? Is that what you call it? Like a
we actually just called it an orgy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
really, once you go past 4, we just call it an orgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do
Oh,
you feel
Jen.
like it's easier to like? Do you feel like it's easier to have this type of relationship, which is, I mean, I guess it's an open relationship? Do you think it's easier because you two are 2 guys?
Yes.
Mhm.
Without a doubt.
Right. I remember when I was 16, my first job, I was a salesperson. Aside from school, I was a salesperson at G-Star back in Lyon. And the closest person that I would work with was gay. And at the time, I was just discovering what it was like to be a heterosexual man and all that stuff. And he would always tell me about how it worked for him and how within the gay community, I want to say the rules were a little bit different.
Absolutely.
And I always find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I think, okay, I'm going to make a general assumption here, and I think Jenn will probably concur with this, is that most women feel that they need to have an emotional connection sexually. And not all, but most heterosexual women need some sort of emotional connection. And
I would say
part of that emotional,
yeah.
part of that emotional connection is like some sort of exclusivity with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been a heterosexual woman, so I can't like speak
That's a
for
good
you.
thing.
Well,
But
you want to at least have a good idea that the person who you're having sex with is not then the next day going and having sex with somebody else.
yes,
I mean,
But I feel like it's changing.
yeah,
I would. Well, yeah,
Right now, because let me tell you that I have a few friends that are with some girls, and these girls are out and about, and it's just like they come over at 2, they get their thing done, they leave, and they do not care. So I feel like there's a change happening.
but it's also like a little, don't ask, don't tell, as far as women are concerned with that. Like,
Mhm.
I don't, when I was actively dating and seeing other people, like, I don't know, I never asked them if I was the only one that they
Yeah.
were with. The implication for me being, if I'm not your girlfriend, or if we're not exclusive, if we didn't have that conversation, then the answer is no. Then I am not the only person that you're sleeping with.
Okay.
So it's kind of an understood thing, but you don't want to actually talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't want the nitty gritty.
Okay. We for this point, we'll basically agree that women require a bit more of an emotional connection.
Yeah. Whereas
Yeah,
men, as you were saying.
Yeah, I would say that for us, and you can feel free to chime in here at any time, like any physical relationship that we have with other men outside of our relationship those relationships don't necessarily affect ours. Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize how important communication and trust is. And that wasn't like we didn't start being that way. It just sort of evolved into that. And we had a lot of conversations. We had a lot of what ifs. Yeah. And I was like, it's been like 2 or 3 years that we've.
Yeah, I would say about 2 or 3 years.
Kind of
the first time
been fairly open with this. And I don't know. It's not for every couple. I mean, like just like the podcast that you guys had. I think the most recent podcast with the open couple. Yes, every couple is different. So the rules are very different for every couple.
But what made you decide to be open? To start to be open?
I would say, really, for me, my biggest thing is that I am not vanilla in any way. I call myself Rocky Road when it comes, if you're comparing it to ice cream. So my tastes are very, very eclectic. We'll just say that. And that could be a whole nother topic for another day. But
that's something that Matt might not be
much. I mean, he's dabbled a little bit. We've done some things, but it's just not his cup of tea.
Some of your interests are not necessarily my interests.
Okay.
And
it doesn't do it for him.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
You have some super dominant tendencies.
I do.
Yeah.
And I'm not really
he's not really the submissive type.
No.
I mean, Jen, you probably know that just as a person, he's not really the submissive type.
No. So, and then I would imagine vice versa then for you, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, if not to sound not to sound lazy when I say this, but there are some things that I just don't want to do. And if somebody else is willing to do that, bro, have at it. Enjoy yourself.
There's no jealousy?
No,
not really.
Because like I said, we've said, we always have the option to join or decline. And sometimes we join each other in these, and this isn't an everyday thing. We're not actively soliciting other partners every day, but when the situation arises, we go with it.
And I think it just comes back to what you were saying, that men are I've had, while I was, obviously dating, I've had sex with no connection, no emotional connection.
Yes. Absolutely.
It was just, I'm getting what I need, what I want. And then I'm literally 3 seconds later, I am thinking about my PlayStation. I'm not even involved.
Yeah. Right.
So I understand. It makes so much sense to me that two guys in a relationship can have that. Like you said, I feel like men are so able to have an emotional investment with one person, and that's the one thing they cherish, and they'll work for it. And that's the one thing they won't go, they won't fuck up. But then the actual sexual or physical need is so detached that I could see how it makes more sense, because you're two guys, so you technically work the same.
Yes.
Yep.
We're wired in the same way. And if you want to get really deep into it, you're not wired that much differently than we are.
No, of course.
As far as the needs and the emotional connections with one person.
So we're all thinking, are we all saying that men have a higher sex drive than women do?
No, I don't agree with that. No.
Separation of emotion and the physical.
I think that
I don't know. I would say men has more of a need for novelty, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
Or new.
Yes. I think for us, it's something different, which totally ascribes to your theory that novelty is important with these liaisons. And there is something to be said for a new partner. Like, it's different, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a new experience.
It's a new experience, and
and everybody's different. When you have sex with one person compared to another, there's things I like about this person, there's things I like about this person, there's things I like about this other person. So it's kind of those things, like maybe today I want this particular type of sex, then the next day I want this particular type of sex, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's fulfilling that need every time you have it. And like you were saying, that novelty, that kind of feeling of like, this is new, this is exciting, this is different, is very nice.
And give each other, because you've been together for 8 years.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the counter arguments to novelty within the same couple is like, you could still have novelty and with that partner experience new things, do things you've never done before. But it seems like for some reason it doesn't hit the same. It's still exciting to try new things, but there's still this thing of just a different person.
Well, and I think with, with that in particular, when you're talking about having new things and new ideas with the same person, again, it goes back to that question, is the other person okay with that? Because like I said, when I have needs of the domination and he does not want to be submissive to me, then I'm not going to get that from him, even though we've tried it. Mm-hmm. He's okay with it.
It's just not my thing.
It's just not his thing. So, I mean, we've tried different positions. We've tried different types of sex. It's always good. But again, sometimes you just need something else in that department.
So there's no, have either of you ever gotten the feels for anybody else during some of these encounters?
I mean, I think, and for me, and this is just me speaking about this, I have to have at least some small emotional connection when I have sex. There has to be something there for me to do it. I'm not really the type to be like a pump and dump. It's just not for me. And I mean, I've done that before, but it's just not me. So, and when you're a dom, you have to somewhat care for your sub to a certain extent. So you have to have at least some kind of small emotional connection. Now, I have the ability to shut off all emotions when I'm having sex, or pretty much doing anything for that matter. So I have yet to have that, Jen, as you're saying, that deeper emotional connection with somebody in that particular instance, unless it's him.
Mm-hmm. So Jake, you just used two terms that are in that world, like the dom and the sub. Mm-hmm. So when you go and find other partners, are you picking from that world? Like, are you a part of that network?
Not always.
Okay.
Yeah, it's totally a network. They're all over the place. I would say it depends. When I'm looking for that in particular, then yes, that's what I'm going to look for. I will go to those particular avenues, or go through those particular avenues to find them. When that's not what I'm looking for, then I won't. It just depends. I typically would say yes, I would, because I do like that dominant submissive type thing when we're talking sexually. So.
And so 2 questions. Do you usually assume a position forever and you're dom and that's it? Or is it sometimes more fluid where sometimes you're dom, sometimes you're submissive? And also, how do you know the person you're talking to is what you need? In the sense of like, how do you know you're both dominant? Apart from the apps.
That's a really hard question. To your first question, there is a wide spectrum of people. So there are strictly dom, strictly top. I mean, and there's so many different terminologies when we're talking about this. But there are strictly doms, there are strictly submissive, and then there's versatile, or what we call switch positions, where you are one or the other, depends on who you're with. Me, I would say, and I've taken they have tests for these things, specifically a BDSM test. When I've taken that test, I am 100% dominant. Like that, okay. When we're talking sexually, 100% dominant. I'm also 100% top. So when we're having a conversation with somebody, and I'm very candid with these people, I'm like, this is how it is. This is what I like. These are my limits. I don't have very many limits. And so when I had just very upfront and honest with people, and people are 9 times out of 10 are very receptive. You will have some times where you will have very dominant alpha males in that role who think they're going to turn you into a submissive, and I'm just like, stop right there, bro. It's not going to happen. So it's never going to happen. So and then you have others who are so submissive that I've seen it where people are like, they want you to tell them to do things like throughout the day, like you control their life. And I'm like, that's a little too much for me. I'm like, that's not my thing either. Like, so it just depepends. And then,
you
like
already have your own life to work on.
Exactly.
Like, somebody else's with their life on top of that.
Yep.
And then how do you know who's who? But just basically comes from conversation. Basically, it's like whenever you meet someone, you're fairly. It always comes back to conversation and being, it's always come back to
communication. Yes, communication is so important. I think in any. I mean, that seems so cliche, but like I think we've both been shocked by the lack of communication that we've seen just in observation of other relationships, homosexual, heterosexual, and that's really where the problems begin in most relationships. And I mean, we've all been in a lot of relationships before, and I think that if one isn't communicating or one doesn't feel comfortable with sharing their viewpoints, their needs, the relationship will fail.
And I think that's kind of an overarching theme with all the couples that we've interviewed on the show too. The importance of communication. And even like in the themes that Julien, you and I have addressed in working out different problems, no matter what the problem is, it always seems to come back to the same issue.
Every time. Yeah. I think it just comes back to, when you're truly open and you really say what you want, what you need out of your partner, out of a relationship, like we're just all scared that our partners are going to be okay with it and we're going to lose them. So I think people just tend to not talk about it and keep it inside, and then it causes problem like 5, 6, 10 years down the line.
Well, and there's something to be said about this open relationship too, because internally we're told from a society standpoint that this is not right. That you're supposed to have one relationship with one person and that's it. I think trying to break that kind of mold is something that's hard to do too. It's very hard to do actually, because again, there's that little voice in your mind that's saying, well, this isn't right. You're not supposed to do this. This is, you've always been told your entire life. And when you look at TV and movies, there you again have one person, two people that are in a relationship, and then that's it. There's no other, they don't talk about that. So
do you find
it's that one, but like you were saying, I always find like, I always feel like the traditional relationship of two people, like, building a family together and all that stuff, is slowly becoming outdated with today's society and how things work. Like it could work 50, 60 years ago when we had no means of communication, but now we're so connected to everybody. We have so much more, like we meet way more people than we used to. So I think it's harder to maintain this traditional unquote type of relationship. But then again, what's the right way to do it? Because personally, me, I don't see how I could be in a functioning open relationship either. So it's like, it seems like we need to get out of that traditional way of doing relationship, and that everybody should talk and have their own way of doing it, without judging how this couple's doing it versus this couple's, whatever works for you.
Like the idea of, so my parents have been together since they were 19 years old. And the idea of two people being together basically throughout their entire, young adult life into their senior and middle age and then senior period. I don't know. I feel like you're going to see a lot less and less of that.
Of course.
And maybe it's the fact that we have factors and that people are more willing to talk about it.
But it's not, because it's not the same as 60 years ago. And I think I've already told you, Jen, there's like this Chris Rock bit where he says like 10 years of marriage nowadays equals like 40 years back then, because in the morning, like before, you would get up in the morning, say bye to your wife, go to work, not talk for 8 hours because you didn't have cell phones and all that stuff. Then you come home, you spend time with her, and then you start again. Now you leave your house and you're texting, Instagramming, TikTok, sending, you're in constant control. So he was saying like you basically, your lifespan is shorter because you guys are constantly together. So you kind of run out of basically feelings for one each other faster, in a sense. You never miss the actual partner that you have.
But while I think there's more temptation now to be, to explore other people in a relationship, I think that it's always been done. It's just something that hasn't been talked about as much and was a lot more secretive. back then, maybe during our parents and grandparents' generation. I think cheating has been around since the beginning of time.
Oh, I think well, clearly that has like cheating has been around. I mean, it isn't a new concept, and not even like swinging is a new. That is not a new concept. But like you said, it's a little bit more acceptable today. Yeah. But I don't think there isn't a place anymore for quote unquote the traditional monogamous relationship between two people who build a family. But for some couples that isn't sustainable, and for some couples an open relationship isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
I just think that the concept of an open relationship is much more talked about now. So maybe people feel like there's an outlet or an alternative to long-term happiness that way.
Agreed. And like Julien said a few minutes ago, like apps, we have so much more communication with other people than was possible even 20 years ago. Like, I mean, what were we doing? Sending like AIM instant messages on AOL. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yes, we are so much more connected, and there are so many more people to explore, for lack of a better term. But I don't even pretend to think that like the way that we conduct our relationship would work for everyone or any other couple. Like every couple is unique.
Yeah. So you found what works for you basically. And that's just how you do it.
Yeah.
Within you actually having sex, does that happen that throughout? Because I understand that sometimes you can be top and sometimes you can be bottom. Can you be both within the same act, that same session?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Look, that is totally normal.
That's very normal.
Yeah. Some men ascribe to one role versus the other. I mean,
and some are both. Yeah. It's called flipping.
Yes.
Or versatile.
Yeah, versatile. Versatile is someone who's versatile, both tops and bottoms.
Yeah.
A flip would be topping and bottoming in the same time.
So would you say verses are more rare than somebody who ascribes to top only, bottom only?
No, I would say versatile is probably the most common.
Yeah.
Okay.
That they like to do both.
Yeah, and it really just depends on the chemistry between however many people are participating.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in situations where I have topped and I have bottomed in the same, like with the same person, in the same two people. What
do you prefer? Bottom?
It depends on who it is.
Okay.
It depends on who it is. Sometimes I think as gay men, we get to have more fun because it isn't just one role. Like you're
not put in a box as much as straight people. And it makes me. I want to know what they think about this whole. We had a conversation on our last podcast, and it's about the fact that a woman can technically make out or hook up with a girl once, and she's still considered straight if that was just like a one-off, just because she was drunk, she had fun. Okay. But if a guy who's been dating girls his whole life now has a sexual encounter with another man, he's automatically no longer straight. Like it's like you are gay right away because you had sex with another man. What do you guys think about that? Because I know, for example, my buddy, that person I was telling you in France, was telling me that he would convert a lot of straight men with wives and kids, and you just like have one night's hookup with them.
That's kind of a two-pronged question. I think there are more men, especially like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, who were probably closeted or were bisexual. Well, I guess you can be closeted and bisexual. It doesn't. I mean, that's not mutually exclusive to homosexuality. But I think there were a lot more guys who were on the down low several years ago. I think that sexuality is more fluid than any of us have ever really believed or accepted. And I don't think that just because a guy hooks up with another guy, gets a blowjob, or even decides to try to bottom and wants the experience, that doesn't make him gay any more than like a drunken two women having a drunken makeout session or a hookup makes them a lesbian.
All right. So for you, it's the same.
Yeah.
Same
I
thing.
agree.
Yeah, fair
I
enough.
think there's also, and when you start talking about women together and then men together, society tends to not bat an eye when it comes to two women, it seems like, as much when you're talking about two men. So I think there's also this kind of feeling that, well, if two women hook up, that's great, but if two men hook up, that's wrong. So they automatically assume that because he happened to either hook up or make out or whatever the sexual act happens to be, that he's automatically gay. And but so I think
more acceptance for lesbian relations than gay relations in this country.
I've always felt that way, and that's just me. I mean, and I don't want to bring religion into it at all, but if you look in the Bible, it talks about two men specifically and never mentions two women ever. So you can technically say that, and that's usually what a lot of people's arguments are in this case, is the religion thing, but there is nothing that specifically talks about two women. It only talks about two men.
And I'll add on to that, like, how many straight men get turned on by two women hooking up?
Yeah.
I mean,
most
for some,
Women.
This is a patriarchal society, not a matriarchal society. So if a man thinks it's okay for two women to make out, then of course it's fine. But not when two men make out, it's fine. So
that's
yeah.
true.
So I mean, you were talking about like Bible references. I mean, back then women were considered property of men. So we didn't have a choice either way. So choice for a woman was just not even in the equation. Whereas choice for a man, like let's talk about it.
Exactly.
That's why you saw those references, and it's true. Like, and Julien and I were talking about this in the last podcast too. The idea of mainstream media tends to focus on gay men more so than lesbian women.
Yes.
As almost caricatures of what a gay man.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Any piece of that, is that offensive to you when you see, say, like a Will and Grace or a Modern Family or a Schitt's Creek, the way that gay people are portrayed?
I think you have to look at the time period in which something was produced. Will and Grace was, I think it debuted in 1998.
Yeah.
We were like, gay men were just, and I was like 14. I was 14 years old in 1998. I was very confused, I was very confused. I was not out. I didn't think I was gay, even though I had urgings. But to see a successful gay man on television, regardless of the fact that he wasn't in a long-term relationship and dated other men and like never really had a long-term boyfriend, was still fantastic to see.
Yeah.
Today, I think we would criticize that a little bit more because he wasn't necessarily an accurate depiction of a gay relationship. But my God, back then it was so important just to see a gay man who was an attorney, who wasn't like a stripper or like a sales clerk, like at a boutique. Like he was a normal guy who happened to be gay. And I think they brought, and I'm just using Will and Grace as a touchstone because that was my generation. But I mean, and then Jack as a character was a little bit more stereotypical of the era of the comic relief and the flitting from relationship to relationship. I think, again, today we would criticize that a little bit more, but 24 years ago, that was amazing.
It was already something. Yeah. I mean, this is where I think Schitt's Creek is kind of upping the bar, making it more accurate.
Correct.
Like something about Schitt's Creek is the relationship that these two have. I was watching it, I was like, wow, I want that.
Yeah, About,
And so,
Yes.
so it's like it made it so universal, whether you're gay, straight,
Yes.
or whatever. You
Yes.
saw the relationship they had, and you're like, "This is amazing."
Mhm.
And absolutely. And I think what I think what was so fantastic about Schitt's Creek is the characters were gay. They weren't the focus of the show.
Yeah, they weren't.
There were other characters, like their relationship and David's sexuality was never the focus of the show. And each character grew through the course of that series. And I think it was fantastic now 20 years ago after Will and Grace, just to go back to that. It was fantastic to see two gay characters just having a relationship within a greater within the greater arc of the series story.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about
It's not
them.
about their
It wasn't
sexuality.
gay themed.
Yeah.
Well, and to answer your question, Jen, to kind of go back to it a little bit, I'm never really offended by portrayals of homosexual people, whether it be male, female, whatever. But the only time I don't really care for it is when it's used as shock value. Like we're just going to do it just to have it. And I can't really think of like one off the top of my head, but actually I can think of one. In the show Glee, there was a transsexual character, and I think the only reason the character was put in there was to shock people. Like it was to be there just to have it. And like that's not right. To me, you know, to me, like if you're going to do it, you should do it right. You should have the character, they should have depth, because gay people are no different really than straight people, except they like the same sex. There is no difference. We're all still human beings. Love is love. So when you make it so that it's like, I don't want to use the word celebrate because it should be celebrated, but when you make it that's like the sole focus of the character is just to be there.
It's too one-dimensional.
Exactly.
It's too one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional.
And it didn't focus on, and I can't remember. I stopped watching that show after a while, but I think it's important that any portrayal of any minority group, and I hate to use that term for us as gay men, but it's important to show a character as human, as an entire human, and not just as one segment of their life, their personality.
You're more than just a gay person. You are a human being. You're a husband. You can be a father. You can be a brother. You can be a son. I mean, it's just there's so many different levels, and your identity is more than just your sexuality. So when they just do that in particular, that's when I get a little offended.
So what do you think then about the new Sex and the City reboot? Because I asked, we had a lesbian woman on the last podcast, and she hasn't seen it. So she didn't really know, what to think. But you guys, I know, have seen it, or at least you have.
Yes. I applaud the producers for trying to make the show more inclusive. To some degree, everyone is represented. I like that. The characters aren't necessarily fully fleshed out. They're not. They're still a little bit one-dimensional. But the fact that you have the fact that they are portraying a 55-year-old woman as questioning her life and her marriage, I think is kind of an important story to tell, because there are a lot of people who go through their entire lives feeling that they are locked into a box. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that character was always that way. And I know that there is a lot of artistic license. I know that storyline is meant to be more inclusive of a lot of minorities, but I think there are a lot of people who identify with that. I don't necessarily think that like the show is making great strides anywhere. I don't think it's culturally important. I don't think that, but I think it's important to show someone who's not 25 who is exploring their sexuality. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
'cause
Because
you
think about
usually
how many
don't-
people out there who are going through the same thing. The OGs,
Right.
the ones who
Yeah.
have the closet themselves for decades and decades, had
Yeah.
families, had children,
Yes.
because they were worried about what other people might
Yes.
say or what society
Yes.
would think. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it's no different. What was the show with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin where their husbands left them for themselves?
Yeah.
That when the husbands left their wives to be together, I think that was that was an important story to tell as well, because how many men, how many women felt that they were really shoehorned into a box, and that's what they had to do, and it was the right thing to do, and that was the acceptable way to live their lives. And we've reached a point in our society where some things are a little bit more, not a little bit, but are just more acceptable and more part of our lives, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Not deviant.
I've known you since we were 12, and I have seen, I mean, the efforts that you used to take to
Mhm.
closet yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you've known or suspected that girls weren't your thing, but I know that you've been.
Oh yeah,
And-
yeah.
yeah,
We both
yep.
have. I mean, we both spent a lot of time doing that, and I think too that was a little bit of a different era, and it was still taboo, and there was a certain path that one was supposed to follow, and I spent a lot of time convincing myself that would be okay. And at one point, I realized that was never going to work for me, and there would always be something missing. And I'm a lot happier. You know this. I mean, you knew me then, and you know me now. And
Yeah. Listen, I've always known.
Well,
I
yeah,
might not have talked about it, but when you would sing, "Man, I feel like a woman," and in high
Too bad we
school,
didn't have iPhones then, right? Because I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Something that I don't understand. If a gay man is attracted to a man, technically that's what it is. You like a man, and why are they gay men that behave, act, and sometimes dress like women? And what kind of so I'm confused by the idea of a man liking another man, but then liking a man that behaves and dressed like a woman. I
totally get where you're coming from, and there are a lot of different angles from which to approach that question.
Yeah.
There are men who enjoy drag shows. There are men who enjoy expressing themselves through dance, through performance, and if that performance includes women's clothes, drag shows, I think that's always been a part of the gay culture, and I think it's important to represent that. We're not huge into drag shows. I mean, we enjoy them, but we're not. It isn't a priority for us as gay men.
But outside of
as far as
shows,
no,
for example, because
Yes.
we will see, for example, in West Hollywood, we could see a guy who is just every day wearing heels and a dress and acting in a way, and I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but acting in a way that is very feminine.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the next facet of this answer. That is less sexual and more gender specific. There are a lot of people who don't feel that they are 100% male. They don't feel that they're 100% female.
Okay.
And though they may enjoy, and I mean, let's be honest, everybody's sexual proclivities are different, and everybody has some sort of weird kink that gets them off. And there are some men who really enjoy feminine men, and that's completely okay. That's acceptable.
And is that
it's normal
to you guys? Is that still considered gay?
Oh yeah. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. Sexuality is so much more fluid.
Yes, of course.
Than we accepted previously, and I think gender identity is much more fluid than society accepted even 5 years ago. And what what does it for me might not do it for somebody else. What does it for Jacob doesn't do it for me sometimes, like certain things. But I think that you're asking really two different questions between sexuality and gender. But I don't necessarily think it changes one's sexuality to be attracted to a more feminine male or a man who likes to wear women's clothing or wears makeup.
They're not gender and sexuality are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, again, like Matt was saying, that when you're into one thing or into another, typically when you're talking about if you're a man and you're attracted to feminine men who dress up, it's typically a type of kink that we usually call, obviously. It's not for me. It's not my thing. If I want to be with a man, I want to be with a man. If I want to be with a woman, I would be with a woman. So that's just me. And
that's not necessarily to imply that someone is bisexual.
Oh,
who's like a gay man who's into like a femme guy. Like,
right.
Yeah,
it just might be what does it.
It comes back to what you were saying, which is it's not one dimensional. Like there's not one specific type of a relationship, and there's not one specific type of this. Like everybody has their own. It's a little bit more fluid than that way of thinking.
There's no one size fits all in any of this.
No.
Yeah,
I mean, when we're talking about anything, when we're talking about sex, sexuality, gender, relationships, there is never a one size that fits all. Everything is unique. And what works for one person may not work for the next. What works for one couple may not work for the next. So,
and let me add to that I feel like it's a little bit freer as a gay man to explore those sorts of different. I think that because there wasn't always, because this is non-traditional in an old-fashioned sense.
Yeah.
Our relationship is non-traditional, which I think is changing and evolving, and that's fantastic. But I think that homosexual relationships have always been different because there wasn't a standard, really.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a standard. There wasn't Ozzie and Harriet coming home to a 3-bedroom colonial with 2.5 children in the gay world, and you go back even farther. There are so many people from the generations, the 2 generations preceding us, of gay men who aren't here, and that's a completely different topic. But because of the AIDS crisis, and I think we've had to figure out really what our relationship looked like. Like we're not interested in having kids. The closest I'm ever going to have the closest we're ever going to get to having kids is your child. And we will spoil him, but
Best
I don't.
ever.
I'll burp him occasionally, and I'll feed him. And when he gets older, we'll spoil him to death. But like, we're not going to have children. And
it's just not for us.
We live together. We own a home together. We will get married at some point, but we haven't like felt the need to do that. So where I'm headed with all of this, in like a Rose Nyland on the Golden Girls St. Olaf story, is that gay men, and I can't speak for lesbians, but for many gay people, you figured out what your relationship is through trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And
just like heterosexual.
Yeah, I mean, it's not any different, but I guess what I'm saying is that we've had more freedom to decide what our life is going to look like.
Yeah, it's so much more freeing. It's true that relationship, like heterosexual relationship, there's this somewhat of a standard-ish type relationship you're supposed to have, and if you don't have it, it's kind of like something's wrong, right? Like, for some reason that's the only example. But like when you're in a relationship, you're moving in with someone. I just saw a TikTok yesterday about this couple talking about how they had 2 separate bedrooms. And they like mostly during the week, that couple never slept together in the same bed because they had different schedule. They were working, but yet again, to a standard relationship, if you do that in your relationship as a heterosexual, most people think, "Ooh, something's wrong with them. They're not going to last." There's problems, but it's not. It's not. It's just what works for them. But for some reason, there's like this standard that we have to everybody's doing it this way. We have to do it this way. So I can see how it's so much more freeing when you don't have the standards. It's whatever works for you.
Yes.
So in that, you could almost look at gay relationships as the pioneering kind of dynamic, like in other words, things have not been traditional for most gay couples from the get-go.
Beginning. Yeah.
So they've had the freedom of choosing what works for them.
Yeah.
And maybe what for them would work for heterosexual couples too, if given that lack of
opportunities.
restraint.
Yes, and I mean, but I think it comes down, and this seems to be an overarching theme with your podcast and with our discussion in general today, is how important communication is and expressing one's needs, and what makes one feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, look,
that's universal.
It's my girlfriend doesn't like when I go into these like reflections, but from what I've seen around me and all the relationships I've seen around me, both my parents not being together, cheating on each other, my cousins, they were married, didn't work out, and then they got different partners, my mom now being single and being with a boyfriend, it's not working, and all that stuff. I often find myself questioning if we're doing relationship right, and if like I've yet to see. I've seen more couples fail than succeed. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not striving to have a successful relationship. And if I can have, and I wish I have, I hope I have a monogamous relationship that I have the kids and the whole thing. But I do, as I get older, question more and more. Like, why is it not working for all these people? And then you have once in a while these couples that have been together, like at my age, they've been together since they were 18 and have 3 kids and everything's great, and they don't see themselves being. But seeing how so much of these relationships fail and how unhappy these people are and how they are, you're here. Some guys, I'll make a joke like, "Oh my God, don't get married." As a joke, he's married. Married, bro.
Yes.
Like, well, that kind of scares me a little bit. Like, why? It's supposed to be the best thing ever, but it seems like it's not working. So
I think, like if we go back into like our parents' generation, my parents were both married to other people and didn't have children before they married each other. Mm-hmm. They've been, what am I, 37? They'll have been married 39 years. And that's great. But they both were divorced and they were in their 30s when they married each other and had me and my sister. But I don't think that either of their first marriages would have survived. I don't think that there's a lot that's different aside from like our ability to communicate with one another and not necessarily relationship communication, but just like Julien said earlier in the conversation, that we have more ways to contact each other during the day. We're always able to be reached. So there's always a way to look at somebody's phone or a way to monitor someone's actions. And I think that's a sign. Like if you don't trust your significant other enough to let them have their things to themselves, that's a sign of a problem. And I think that goes into even, and so if you go back in like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, couples of any sort, I think just felt that they had to be together. You didn't get divorced. You didn't separate.
Divorce was very taboo.
Or you did, and you didn't maybe reflect on why it didn't work out. And it's always it's always bidirectional. It's never one person's failure. I think it's important to say that, like, relationships are bidirectional. They are a two-way street. And I think maybe one of the great things about living in the time period in which we do is that reflection is more important and is given a higher precedence than it used to, and it isn't just. I'm rambling.
When you talk about that, you're reflecting on it, and you see these failed relationships. There's a lot of people who don't reflect at all, and then disaster happens. So it's a good thing. I mean, it's probably not a bad thing that you're reflecting or that you even think about it, that, you're going to be cautious. If you have not seen a healthy relationship, then it's probably a good thing that you're not rushing into one, because it could crash and burn. Not that it's going to,
no, of course.
but it could.
No, but it's good to question it, and it's good rethink.
The counter argument to that is, okay, well, you kind of attract what you're thinking. So like if you are questioning all of this and you're not really like, basically, if you believe that you will have a monogamous long distance relationship with kids and it's going to work out, it might work better than if you're in it and you're constantly thinking, oh, well, I wonder if that's the right way of doing it. Right. So I understand both point of view in a sense. It's healthy to question it, but then you questioning also makes you look like that's not what you're looking for, or that you're like, I don't know if I'm halfway in. And then if you're not questioning it, then it's like, how can you not question considering everything's going on? But, you're not questioning it, so you're actually more likely to be successful in it, right?
Yes, and I think there's a certain level of emotional maturity to make a successful relationship. I met Jake when I was almost 30 years old, and had we met when I was like 25, we wouldn't be together. And that's nothing about him. That's because I was emotionally immature, and I was very, I guess I'm still a little bit self-absorbed, but I've learned.
I see a Jen smile. We both shared a look right then.
But I think that I had experienced enough and had thought about those things, like what I don't want to say been through. It wasn't like it was like some sort of like trek, but like all of the experiences that I'd had shaped me into the person I was, where I was open to having a relationship. And then I'm not sure you know this, Jen, but several years ago when you were back in town for a period of time
after my divorce, when I went
you and I were 6 or 7 months into our relationship, and I really liked him and he really liked me, but I was like, ooh, this is not fun territory. And I took a step back, and he came to my house and was like, listen, you either date me or you don't. You're either with me or you're not. Do you remember that?
I remember that conversation that you guys had.
Yes.
It was like a sort of an ultimatum. But I think it was like this moment for you.
It was. And this is in no way like I'm not, this isn't any sort of blame, but what it was another perspective for me, that I was perhaps thinking a little bit too much about the negatives and ignoring the fact that we had a really good thing going on.
It also like got you out of your own way.
Yes, absolutely. I have, you've known me for so long.
If like just jump and try it.
That's me. I
overanalyze too, so I totally get that. But I'm also very black or white, and I'm also very short. So if I want an answer when I want it, so
and that's why you guys work. That's why you're able.
It did.
You're the yin and the yang.
Yeah,
both of you were like that. We wouldn't be here right now.
That's true.
Yeah, no, we would absolutely not.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Well, we'll let you guys go to your mimosas.
Yeah.
Enjoy the time.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Thanks for having us. This has
been fun.
Yeah,
I'm not going to listen to my own voice when it's released.
Oh, I am. I'm ready to.
I mean, it's fun when we can have open conversations like that. I love that.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Do we have Julien? Do you have any questions about Jen before we leave that I might be able to answer?
Honestly, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, you've got like prime opportunity here to like ask anything.
Later on.
I'm gonna be a nice co-host and just not
because he is a respectful colleague.
No, I want this podcast relationship to work, so I will not.
Maybe the one big thing that I can remember from, was it high school or middle school? We were in Spanish class together.
And you did all the Spanish homework?
I sat right behind me, and you would unhook my bra.
Oh, I totally did. I totally did that.
So I would literally have
to walk to the bathroom
in front of everybody and like hold myself like this, like,
yes.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah.
You still do that.
I'm still I was a child, and I'm still a child.
You sure do know how to take off a bra very quickly.
He does.
It was part of the experience. I learned how to do that. But I mean, I think I don't know. We had fun.
We had fun. We were each other's biggest bullies, though, I would say.
Oh,
In high school,
yeah.
we were nasty to each other. We were really
We
nasty.
were,
We
yeah.
cried probably more than anybody else made me cry in high school.
Oh.
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. You're a grade A asshole, but you obviously have your redeeming qualities. So,
Or we wouldn't
Some
be
redeeming
sitting here
qualities.
today.
I wouldn't be sitting here today at 37 years old, having met at 12. Ew.
25 years.
Yeah,
You've known each other for a quarter of a century.
we're old, but thank you guys for having
Yes,
us
thank you.
on.
And
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
we enjoy listening to you guys.
Yeah,
So
we do.
thank you.
Thank you.
The best.
Yeah, I'm glad I actually asked that question because that guy that I was friends with, I'm still friends with back when my G-Star day, he would always say that for him, the gay guys that dressed act like girls, and I'm using his words, were freaks, and that's not what he was into. For him, it was like, I like men. I want a manly man, like a guy that's like, a real man. That's what he wanted. And I was like, okay, so that makes sense. If you were into men, that's what you want.
Sure, but that's I wouldn't say that's the general norm.
No, that's in general. But again, like we were, it was like what, 15 years ago, all this stuff. So I think the gender fluidity that they're talking about now is so, like, everything is so much fluid, so much more fluid,
So much more
Everything.
fluid, but also like so much more talked about and in the open and part of like the public discord now. And it's going to be interesting to see where we stand with like sexuality and gender and what it means to be in a relationship, or even the concept of marriage, where that's all going to be like decades from now.
Oh no, yeah. I don't know what, but I'm like convinced that 50 to 100 years from now, if we're not all dead because of some catastrophe, that there won't be any more gay, lesbian, heterosexual. It's just like you're with whoever you are, and then you could.
Like there's not going to be like black, white. I think everyone's just going to be. I don't think there's going to be labels for much of anything.
You think there's not going to be any more black and white people?
I mean, I don't think that we're going to be labeling them as such. God, I know so many mixed. I mean, like I feel like maybe in media or whatever, but I just feel like it's just become more of a melting pot now than it ever has been before. It's not so homogenous. So
it's still interesting, this whole thing. I really want you to get us that love anthropologists so they can ask questions about it, so we can ask questions about all this.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution of love and how relationships have evolved throughout the years, and if there's any research to show, because that would be, I think, so helpful in understanding where we're at.
Yep. All right.
Well,
so so I guess that concludes this episode.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was, even though I've known Matt for decades now, he's super insightful. And I love Jacob. And I love them together. And I listen, like, we don't have enough of these conversations.
Oh,
on
our great to see that it works for them. It works.
Yeah.
It's another example of, you have your own relationship, do what works for you both, and don't
finding their own happiness and their own avenues for happiness.
Don't compare yourself to this other couple that's doing a certain thing. Great. So we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
All right. Have a good week.